Hello. So I am sorry for starting this later than I had planned on starting it. Um, Couple of things before we get into this. First of all, I'm a bit exhausted. I, interestingly enough, went to my first party post COVID last night, and I went being totally sober since I'm recovering from surgery and I have all these fucking pain pills and things in my system. And I was like, let's just not even try to do it. But somehow I'm still physically exhausted. Maybe it's because I'm 30. I think is that what's happening? Is I'm 30 now, and now my body is just like, hey, you just fucking probably can't do that anymore. And I didn't even stay out that late. I only stayed out till 2, but still. It was nice to finally see people. It was nice to like see people I haven't seen throughout the whole pandemic. So yeah, it was nice, but I'm tired and I kind of didn't want to do this today, but um I I feel like we need to do it because if you did not join us for the last um call-in show, I at the very beginning of the call-in show was very concerned that we would not get um bi men coming in and sharing their perspective because bi men are often quite quiet during these conversations. But what ended up happening is bi men dominated all 3 hours of the show. We did have Lindsay Ellis call in and give her perspective, but outside of her, she was the only one who managed to give the perspective of a bi woman. And so today is going to be the show for basically everyone who's not a man. So um, if you are wanting to share your perspective on this conversation, I am very much looking forward to hearing from you on this issue. So I'm just getting myself set up. I don't know if you guys can hear me pouring myself a drink and everything until I sit down. I've got my Zevia, which is spicy. It's so funny. So like last night at the party, I was just walking around holding. I had 2 different Lacroix, and I was walking around the party drinking Lacroix. And I didn't feel really weird about it. I was like drinking my Lacroix, just chilling and not being drunk or high, and it was quite nice actually. So, hopefully that sticks. But anyway, we're going to be having a conversation about the podcast topic of last week, I guess, um, about whether or not bi people have so-called straight passing privilege, right? I almost feel like we already get the topic at this point. Um, I'm really excited to have this conversation, but I'm also kind of tired of talking about this. But I really feel like this conversation would be incomplete without the perspectives of non-men. I'm glad we got so many perspectives, but gee, I'm not looking forward to editing 6 hours, I'm assuming, of footage. Um, I would like for this not to go for 3 hours. That would be really, 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 really great. If that's not how if that's not how this would go, if we managed to have just a lot of productive conversation and I felt like I had enough. Just for context, when I actually did end up editing the final call-in show for the last time I did this, I think I only included probably like 8 phone calls. Um, and so, yeah, um, that's probably about the amount I'm going to keep. And theoretically, I'm going to have 2 different versions of the call-in shows, one for bi men, the other for, people who aren't bi men. And the reason why I wanted to talk to bi men is because I talked about my experience with bi men in the podcast, and so I felt like it was kind of important to get that perspective. But there's a long and I think different conversation when we're talking about people who are not men. And I will restate the long list of clarifications and qualifiers that I did in the last couple of times I've had this conversation. I don't think that straight passing privilege is the right term. I don't think that it is a privilege to have your sexuality erased. I don't think that that is a positive thing for most people. Um, the conversation started because Lindsay Ellis sort of made some comments forever ago about her ability to, as she puts it, opt out of oppression because she is a bi woman in a relationship with a cis man. And quite a few people had their opinions about it. And I watched a really great video by Savvy Writes Books, where she goes into a lot of really, really great detail about um, her personal perspectives on this and also the impact that biphobia has specifically on bi women. And I thought it was a really, really great video. So everybody should go and check that out. I listen to the conversation as a person who isn't bi, but as a trans woman who has dated a lot of bi men, my sort of I guess weirdness with this conversation is that I've dated a lot of bi men who ultimately end up pursuing cis women, and that's been kind of an interesting experience for me because um you know, I don't want to say that that people sort of choose in quotations to live a life of heteronormativity, but I'm very aware of the fact that anybody who dates me would have to potentially deal with having their heteronormativity questioned. Um, and that is a journey that I think the vast majority of men, the vast majority of bi men who interact with me are just unwilling to take, just in my personal experience. Now, obviously, talking about my experience with bi men, I am talking about a very small um, selection of men. I'm talking about a very specific group of men, not all bi people. But I this came up for me because I was in a situation with a bi guy forever ago, and he recently he stopped seeing me. He told me he was polyamorous. We started seeing each other. Then he started seeing this other woman, cis white woman. And we had to stop seeing each other so that he could give her monogamy. And then he recently reached out to me to tell me that I was sexy and that if I were bisexual, that I would have an opportunity to date him and his partner. And I did not love that because we broke up because of his basic, his tabulations of deciding that this person was. I mean, this is my obvious. I don't think that it's as conscious as this, but I think that when you are dating somebody and you say that you're polyamorous and then you meet someone that you become monogamous with, you have definitely made the decision to choose one person over the other, um, because that's just what that is. And that's been my general experience with bi men, where they can mostly justify a relationship with me when they are single or unattached or not trying to give somebody monogamy. Um, and that is kind of frustrating because it's very alienating to be put into a position where I'm put in, where men are willing to date me, for short periods of time, but they ultimately end up leaving me for what I will always sort of cast as the most socially acceptable option. And that's something that's hard for me to digest, because obviously, well, um, all of these conversations we're having are dancing around the issue of biphobia, and a big biphobic trope is that bi people are just sort of having a good time and they're not really serious about their relationships that veer away from heteronormativity, right? That's a big biphobic trope. For me, though, that has kind of been my observation of the very specific group of men that I very specifically interact with in a very specific way. So I found this conversation to be a bit interesting because for me, I don't think that these men I don't think that these men deliberately choose this. I don't think that they sit down and say, Catherine is the least socially acceptable option. I'm going to sideline her and utilize her as a sexual outlet. before I find something more normative. I don't think that they consciously think that, but I think that it is a very subconscious thing, because part of why this has been hard for me, we talked about this during um, my conversation with bi men, is that I've known so many of these bi men to be very confident in their attractions, very out about their attractions. They're the sort of people who will say, I don't really care what you've got going on down there. And they'll say that, but their dating history is almost exclusively cis women. And when you look at the people that they sleep with, the people that they have a good time with, people that they have less serious relationships with, it's almost like everyone who is not a cis woman is relegated to that. And it's almost like everyone who is a cis woman has an access to that type of relationship with them that I just don't. And so, um, I do think that, I'm really glad that I had some men call in, and we didn't really ever get much of an answer for that. It was mostly just this is just the way that things have gone. And the question that I was really posing was, is this really something that um you know is just kind of sort of happening because of the way that things fall, the way that the cookie crumbles, or are people leaning onto more heteronormative patterns because that is what we're all encouraged to do? um Now, the reason why I want to have this conversation specifically with bi women is because I think that this is far more true with bi women. Ah! And then of course God struck me down and tipped me off of the thing. Far more common with bi women. I've known so many more bi women who have kind of gone down that particular path. Most of the bi men that I've known, which, as I say that, that's a very specific group of people, does not describe all bisexual people. That is bi men who I know, who tend to be bi men with a preference, who tend to be bi men who prefer women, right? Um, they don't really feel very um erased by conversations like this, because generally speaking they don't really identify themselves within the acronym that much. um you know they really don't see it as like an erasure of their identity to be read as straight. But I've known quite a few bi women who feel quite differently, and I think that um you know I spoke briefly about compet in the podcast, and I talked about it in the podcast because I think that people think that that's what especially when it comes to women, that's a lot of what the experience often is a lot of women are raised to only see men as viable romantic options, and so it takes them a while to parse what exactly their attraction to women is. And so I've seen a lot of situations where a bi woman will be in a relationship with a cis man, and they will, discover or figure out that they have an attraction to women, and now they're sort of figuring out how to explore that, and that kind of leads to another conversation. I've experienced and observed this a lot in the poly community, where you have this couple who is in so many ways read as a straight couple, even if that's not the way that they are. And their space that they take up in the poly community is mostly them finding bi women who they could potentially um, experience stuff with mutually. This often ends up being a mess. This ends up often being a fucking mess. Um, but it's really common for that to be something that I've observed. We've talked about that before. I've been unicorn hunted several times since just opening my mouth and being present in the poly, kink, BDSM, all the various communities. And so, yeah, that's really common. And I know that there are bi women who feel very alienated by that, because not just even bi women, just queer women, queer folks in general, who end up being on the other end of that, who end up definitely feeling like they're being sort of used. And there's just so many interesting angles to have this conversation from. And I would really, really like to hear more people who have had those experiences. I want to hear from bi women about their experience with erasure. I want to hear from, people who aren't, all non-men about their experience with this topic and feelings about this topic. One of the points that I reinforced in the last call in is that obviously when we're talking about this sort of straight passing privilege, we're sort of talking about a very specific person. We're not talking even about all bi people. We're talking about, um, a very specific, generally very cis normative person who is able to pass as straight in general, before even any conversation about them beyond that is had. So yeah, I would really like to open up this conversation and no men, if you're a man, do not call. I tried to do that yesterday. We were going to go on this whole other path and I said, please don't call, no more men. And men still called. And I was, we'd reached 3 hours and I was like, it's just time to go at this point. We've been here for too long. I would like not to be here for, I would love not to be here for, 3 hours this time. I would love that. That'd be great. But I also don't want to make it seem like I'm giving more time to men than I am anyone else. That was the opposite. I literally thought we were going to do a good hour of men calling and then that would be it. I thought that we would do a good hour and then we'd do 2 hours of everyone else calling. I did not expect so many men to come to call in and to give their perspective. So yeah, I'm excited to open up the lines. I'm gonna open up the lines right now. Um oh god, there's already people waiting. How does that happen? First of all, I love Zevia. This is totally irrelevant, but this Zevia ginger ale, it's the best. It is literally the best. It's so good. All right, let me pin the number. Um, if there are mods, I don't know if it always looks like we don't have any mods in here. Well, we'll keep an eye on the chat just in case. Part of the problem I think yesterday I had was I kept my eye on the chat yesterday and we got really overtaken. So I'm about to answer some calls, but if you are a man, please hang up the phone. If you are a man, please hang up the phone. If you are a man and you are manly McMahon or man, this is not your time to call. Okay? This is not your time to call. No misandry or whatever, you know. No misandry. We love men here. We totally support men. We like, super like love men here. Like I love some of my best friends are men. So like I literally couldn't be biased against them. I love men. Men are great. I have several you know man partners and therefore it's not possible for me to have a bias against men. So I'm just saying, if you're a man, hang up. I don't want to hear from you. I don't want anything. I don't want anything from you. Not today. Not today. For a little bit of time, for just a little bit of time, can we just not have men? Okay. 3 hours of my time yesterday. Okay. 3 hours. I started the crazy thing is I started the conversation being like, let's not have a 3 hour chat. Like I was like, I would really love not to do this, but yet and still, um, you know. So, okay, I think we've made our point clear. So if I answer the phone and you're a man, you know, I'm just gonna pretend you're a non-man, okay? I'm gonna fucking pretend, okay? Because please don't be that guy. Please don't be that guy, okay? All right, I think I made myself clear. I'm gonna answer some calls. I will say that I'm checking in with myself. I'm really trying to figure out how much of this I can do in terms of you know, these call-in shows. I'm really thinking about maybe making it every other week. Making it so I'll do a True Tea call-in show on Tuesday. No, I'll do the True Tea episode Tuesday, will be uploaded, and then I'll do a call-in perhaps the next week. I'm thinking that might work better for me. Just because this is a bit much, you know, and I've been trying to reduce the amount of stress and things, but you know, I think that maybe it'll be more sustainable that way. We'll see. We're still figuring it out. I just want to, before we get into calls, thank you guys for sticking with me through format changes and stuff, because I'm still figuring out you know, I'm still figuring out how to do stuff and what makes the most sense for me and how, you know, yeah. Anyway, I hope that my point about men has been taken, because I will hang up on you if you are a man. All right, I'm going to take a call. Hello.
Hello.
Hi there. Who am I speaking to?
This is Danny,
Hey, Danny. Where are we calling from?
Colorado.
Ooh, Colorado. I've been there. I've been to
Yes,
Boulder.
I love Boulder.
Beautiful up there. So, what's your
It
true tea?
is. So my true tea, I am non-binary, but I was assigned female at birth.
Okay.
So a lot of my life experience being bi before I kind of realized that womanhood wasn't for me was spent, you know, as a woman, or at least women presenting. So I feel kind of like it's worth, you know, kind of explain my experience with it, because it's interesting, to say the least, being a woman who's bi, especially as I was then, which was very with a very strong preference for other women.
Oh, interesting. Interesting.
Like when you talk about like a lot of women, you see bi women who wind up with men. That was always like not my experience. I felt far more uncomfortable with men than I did with women. It was very much a thing of like, when I was with like lesbians specifically, it was more of a thing of like, yeah, you had to deal with some insecurity with that. Even dating other bi women, there was that insecurity. But I think part of the reason I vastly preferred women is that a lot of men get a lot of ideas in their heads when you tell them you're a bi woman.
Yeah, that's what I've been heard. That's what I've been told. Yeah, they immediately fetishize it.
Oh, immediately. Like, and so what wind up happening with that is a lot of men, when I would not be down sexually for everything they wanted to do, or even just not at that moment, they got very butthurt. Like, it was this constant expectation that because I'm bisexual and because I am a woman, I am now this sort of sex object who's like far more okay with all of your fantasies, and that is not the case.
Yeah.
They were and it was a thing of like, I felt far more uncomfortable in a situation where my partner didn't respect me sexually than I did in a situation where my partner didn't necessarily respect my loyalty as much.
It's interesting because I had a lot of comments that that said that said the opposite, which I found really interesting. They said that like when they were dating lesbians gave them a lot of anxiety about the potential of them leaving them for a man. And that anxiety was like more exhausting than the man who was fetishizing them, which I found kind of confusing because I would never want to be fetishized, you know?
Yeah, no, I think it's just a lot of women, I think are just less thrown off by a man being very sexually aggressive than they are by a woman being like very insecure with them.
Ah,
I think
interesting.
I could definitely understand the experience of, well, you know, a lot of women are socialized to kind of accept men as like the aggressor in sexual situations. And maybe this is like my queerness kind of seeping into that, but I'm not a woman. And so I
Mhm.
kind of wasn't like, I was immediately more thrown off by that than I was by my partner being insecure about like my loyalty. Like, don't get me wrong, that's still a really shitty experience,
Mhm.
but the threat of sexual violence was more off-putting to me, or like the hint of the threat more so. Like
Mhm.
when I got the vibe that my partner wasn't like fully okay with my sexual autonomy, that's when I got like very uncomfortable
Yeah.
dating men.
And I mean that's how I feel too cuz like just it's funny because a lot of the bi women I know, they deal with that sort of thing where um you know, maybe they're in it because I know a lot of poly people. Maybe they're in a situation where they're poly and they're open to going and having experiences with other people, but the men almost can't. They like have to be involved, you know, like they have to be. It has to be for them or something that they are into, and that doesn't seem like a good time. I mean, I get why it would work, but it doesn't seem like a good time
Yeah.
because I find that like the women who women naturally like are not often the women who men will naturally like, if that makes any sense.
Oh yeah.
Like I've
Yeah, that makes
noticed,
a lot of sense.
yeah, like there's like the connection done for like the male gaze, and there's like, hey, we just really vibe with each other, and they're not, and that's like not even considering a man, and a lot of
Yeah.
men aren't crazy about that.
Yeah, I think that's why dating apps tend to throw a lot of bi women off,
Mm,
because I know a lot of bi women with the personal experience, and I've had a little bit of personal experience, is that when you go on dating apps, and if you're open about your bisexuality, which I refuse not to be, like you will get a lot of married couples that kind of think they can fix their marriage by throwing a bi woman like sort of as like
mm-hmm.
a sex toy to spice it up, and it's very much a thing of like, uh, that I think is the most like objectifying like I could feel. Like that whole situation just throws me off.
Yeah, yeah. Like I have a couple of lesbian friends who they literally cannot go on any dating app, even the apps designed for lesbians, without running into men catfishing as women, often using their partner's pictures, trying to connect with them, and it's terrible. Like I do not envy being a woman who loves women, being on any app, because it just seems like the you could try so hard to avoid men and you're still gonna run into men.
But
um
yeah, because they feel the entitlement for a woman's body, and
yeah,
it's a bad time.
yeah, it's great. Like my friend showed me this screenshot of this guy talking to her, and well, this girl talking to her, and the conversation was going well until she started like randomly bringing up this guy. And my friend is a lesbian, like she's no interest in men, but she was like, yeah, he's really cool and you'd really like him, and da 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 da. And it was just so weird.
Yeah,
So
that
creepy. Like, no thank
yeah,
you. Ugh. I do not
yeah, and
envy. Go on.
it's continue.
Oh no,
I'm
what
just
were you gonna
on my
say?
thoughts.
I
It's just a thing of like, I think that's why bisexual women are so much more vocal about biphobia, is because
mm,
it's like a thing of when a man like kind of, when one side of it fetishizes you and then the other side of it kind of gets almost upset at you being fetishized, I think a lot more
mm,
is like that's the position bi women find themselves in when it comes to men, and dating men and doing that while a member of the LGBT community. Like I
mm,
think a lot of times what it is that you're like, you kind of feel like you're in a position where you can't win to the point that like it was kind of almost a relief for me to come out as non-binary and to like start to transition, because then all of a sudden I was far more welcome in this community, and I found it to be a far less hostile place when I had something more quote unquote legitimate to, you know, talk about and like express, and like a part of my queerness kind of was seen as more valuable than another within the community.
And that is so sad that you have that experience, that you felt like you had to be more queer in order to be accepted. I mean, congratulations on, you know, finding yourself and knowing who you are, but it sucks to feel like the only way you could have possibly been more welcomed is if you had more proximity to queerness. I've heard a lot about people feeling ousted from queer communities because of you know, just being you know, seen as bi women. Can you talk a bit about like what it felt like to be rejected from those spaces?
Like, yeah, because it's the thing of I feel like the queer community, what's so beautiful about it for like all people is that, you know, you can experiences and still have this one thing, but when you're like bisexual, it's this thing of, especially if you're cis and bisexual, it's this thing of all like acceptance is conditional. Like the acceptance from cis straight people is conditional on you performing heteronormativity, and then acceptance from queer people is more like you have to be performing like homosexuality in a way when that's not the thing. And for, at least for the queer community, I can understand it a bit more because it is a place where this is this thing that connects us. So if it appears straight on the surface, I can understand the hostility more, but it's still really painful because, like, I think a lot of people who aren't bisexual have this idea of what bisexual privilege looks like versus what it actually looks like. And I feel like a lot of the hostility comes from their idea of what that is, wherein that's not actually what it is. All acceptance in that situation is not really acceptance. It's not even really tolerance. It's just kind of ignoring this part of you and just pretending it doesn't exist for now until you do something outwardly queer. And it was definitely a thing of like, I think the reason a lot of bi women, and at least also me especially, have an uncomfortability with always being assumed straight is we really understand how conditional that acceptance is. And to the point where I would rather just rip the Band-Aid off. Like, I'm bisexual. I'm definitely not straight. Like, let's put that out there now, because I really don't want to have to go through the whole process of kind of feeling invalidated by my own community and then only feeling validated like by straight people when like that part of me isn't visible. I'd rather just kind of fall into a place of like, I'm going to be very out and loud and proud about this so that it kind of can't be ignored. I'm going to be very loudly bisexual so that you can't erase me. You can't just sit there and pretend I'm, you know, something I'm not. And some people, you know, kind of don't do that. There are definitely people, like Lindsay Ellis said, who like sort of opt out, but I always felt very uncomfortable with that. I don't like how conditional it felt. I don't like how I felt boxed in by that. And I think a lot of other bi women also understand that experience.
Yeah. And that's so interesting you bring that up, because in my experience, like, bi women are way more like, I'm fucking bi. Did I tell you that I was bi? Did I forget to mention that I was bisexual? Here's my bisexual pin and my bisexual haircut. Oh, also I sit in this bi way. Like, the women that I know who are bi are very, very vocal about it, whereas the men that I know who are bi are so much less so. So it's kind of interesting to hear that that's part of just like, hey, just, I'm fucking gay, I'm queer, fucking like acknowledge it and see it, please. God damn it.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, I don't want to be straight passing in any capacity.
yeah. And it's interesting because I had in the comments, people were talking about like, some people were like, I wish people looked at me and saw that I was bi. How can I do that? How can I look a certain way where people would read me as bisexual, you know? And I thought that was interesting because, like, the bi women I know, they quote queer code pretty hard, you know? and
Yeah.
where there's like this thing where when you're in the same room, it's like, you like, we know you recognize each other just from the way that you're dressed. I find that fascinating to observe.
Oh yeah. I have a friend Josh who is a bi man, so he's not allowed on this call.
No
But
men.
he clocked me immediately when we met.
Mm.
Like immediately. My other friend who introduced us, who is a lesbian, she's wonderful. He was immediately like, "So are you guys like into each other?" Like he didn't even begin to question it. He immediately looked at me and was like, "Not straight." Couldn't be.
And that must have felt really, really good because, especially being in a position where you weren't always seen in that way, like that was probably very affirming.
Oh, it was great. And then a couple years later, I watched one ContraPoints video, and now I realize I'm trans. It's a great time.
She's transing the youth.
God bless.
Well, I think I'm going to pick up another caller, but this was such a lovely call, and thank you for giving me perspective from a non-binary person who's had
Oh,
many different
gladly.
ways of living. Thank you for following directions and calling in and not being a man. I appreciate that.
Oh, please. It'll be a cold day in hell before anyone reads me as a man as I am. All right.
All right.
Have a great one.
Bye.
Bye.
That was such a lovely call. See, these calls are already like they were starting out in a really good note. I'm trying not to read the chat, but we don't have any mods in here, I don't think. I need to be better at like scheduling stuff so that my mods can like be around when just in case, because I vaguely see arguments and things. Hopefully everybody's being good and not being too mean to each other. We're having conversations, like we're all just trying to talk about this. We're not here to erase anybody or make anyone feel bad. We're posing weird, complicated questions and hopefully understanding each other a bit more. So I'm gonna pick up the next call. I'm hopefully it's not a man. If it's a man, I'm gonna hang up. I'm just letting you know. Love men, support men, but not today. Not today. Give enough of my time to men. All right, here we go. Not today. Hello. Give enough of my time to men.
Hi.
Hi, who am I speaking to?
Hi, this is Brenna. I'm a bisexual woman from Ohio.
Oh, hi. Ohio.
Mm-hmm. So it's a great place to be queer.
Is it really?
No.
I was like, I would not imagine that. I've been to Toledo,
no. I wish. We're working on it,
as you must. So what is your true tea?
I've been thinking a lot about being bisexual lately, so this is like well timed for me. But it's interesting to me how a lot of people seem to think that the privilege you get as a bisexual person is like this on and off switch. And that's like very much not my experience. Like some of the worst things I've gone through because of being bisexual had absolutely nothing to do with who I was currently dating.
I'm curious what those things are.
I've personally I've never actually, when I was seriously dating a woman, I've never actually had any harassment in public.
Oh, okay.
I guess I must just feel really lucky, so that's cool. But so that's not like an issue for me passing in public. It's not like I feel like much difference in my life based on who I'm literally going out with. But like on the other hand, if I get outed at work, I've had a senior coworker who's trying to pressure me into a threesome with his wife,
Oh, wow.
And I experienced some harassment from my manager, making up stupid things to discipline me for when she found out. And
wow.
I've lost really good friends because people started spreading rumors that I had a crush on her when I didn't.
Oh, wow.
so it's just like it feels a lot more fluid to me, like when you are privileged and when you're not.
Mm.
And it's really scary because you just don't know when it's going to come. It's not like I can predict, like, okay, right now I'm safe because I'm dating a man. Like, it's not like that for me.
Mm.
It can come out of nowhere, and I never know.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's probably like why it being described as a privilege is probably alienating to you. Um,
Yeah, I mean, it is really nice to know, like, okay, if I happen to fall in love with a man, like, my parents are going to show up to my wedding, right? Like, that's great. I
mm,
love that.
mhm.
But then it's also scary because it's like either way, it's like I'm afraid of falling in love with anybody because I'm gonna lose
Uh,
something either way. Like either I'm gonna lose my family being involved with my relationship because I end up with a woman, or I'm gonna lose the community of people that I feel like actually understands me, like actually doesn't give me a blank stare when I say certain, queer things. And it's tiring. It's really tiring.
mm. How does that influence, well, you said you're afraid to fall in love with anyone, so I'm curious, does that influence at all your dating patterns? Do you think, well, if I date this person, I'm gonna have to go through all this stuff with my family?
It's I mean, I fall in love real hard, really easily, so it's
Oh,
kind of
really?
inevitable.
Okay.
um, but I'll stick it out no matter what the trials are gonna be. But it's just, yeah, dating's hard.
Yeah. Yeah, it's scary out
um,
there.
yeah, and then there's always, it's just like, when you love both, it's like I'm like happy to be monogamous if that's what my partner wants, but also it's like, ah, shoot, like I don't know if I want to give up boobs.
That's so interesting because I do know a lot of the bi women I know, and again, this is me speaking from my group of people that I know. It's not all bi people, but I know a lot of bi women who end up in relationships with cis men who actually strongly prefer women. But and like the amount of men that they'll be, it's like they like all women and like one man, you know, like
I
every
think
woman
like
they
as
meet.
far as aesthetically pleasing, that's totally true for me. But like I also like totally cannot say which I like more. People have asked me this and I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't know. Like I kind of like dick and I kind of like boobs. Like which is pretty cool. Um, like I don't know.
Yeah, and
um,
this makes me think of like one of the common sort of biphobic stereotypes is that bi people won't be monogamous. That's one of the common
yeah,
fears is like,
yeah. I
well,
don't have trouble being monogamous. I do. There's an attraction to being poly because you can have both. Like that's great. But
mhm.
like I'm also a very loyal person, and I'm never gonna break my partner's trust. That's what we agreed on. That's what I'm doing.
Yeah,
um, I mean, I've actually all of the cis men I've had serious relationships with were bisexual. And
interesting.
we've often come to an agreement where like we're going to be primary partners and we're going to be each other's like main person, but we're going to casually see the other gender on the side.
Ah,
Um,
interesting.
but then of course, like we're not open about that. We're not announcing that to the world, so we still look like a straight relationship.
Hmm. Well, so now I'm
um,
I'm curious, like, so part of the conversation I was having is me specifically, like literally being in the situation you're describing, where I know somebody who is partnered and they are given the freedom to essentially sleep with people who others might not read as being straight or whatever. Um,
hmm
and how that sort of has made me feel because I often will avoid I personally will avoid the um, married person who is allowed to have sex on the side with people outside
hmm
of the gender of which they are dating, or in their
Yeah.
view, because obviously, you know, I personally see, cis women and I, we share a gender. We're not the same, but we share a
Oh
gender.
yeah. Yeah.
But
See,
but
like that's the only time I get jealous is when they're dating someone of my same gender. So like that would
so
make
is
it be
that's
okay
the
for me because
anxiety,
you're
is
the
like
same
you like
gender.
it's like you would get jealous if he were to go and be with another cis woman.
Yeah, another cis woman or another trans woman. It's just like I feel like
Mm.
I don't know. I don't ever want to feel like I'm in competition with another woman over my man. I know that's like not how it has to be, but
Yeah.
that's just I'm not there yet.
Yeah, and I think that like acknowledging that you're there is such a an important thing. I mean, like for me, it's interesting though because like part of my anxiety and issue with most of these men is the sort of lack of boundaries that they've made. Because you know, obviously, I've been in several situations that are upsetting and hurtful to me that are similar to the ones you described, but I would not
hmm
have opted into that if I knew that that's what it was. You know, if I
Well, yeah,
knew
it's
that,
gotta be upfront that hey, this is what I'm looking for. I'm looking for
hmm,
something casual. Like that's
yeah,
like that was always a rule that had to be in our profiles.
yeah,
Like
yeah, because that gives someone the
because that's just not
choice.
okay.
Yeah, that gives somebody the option of like, okay, I'm going to entertain this or I'm going to not. Because, you know, I mean, and I guess part of the problem is why men don't say this is if a man came to me and said, hey, I'm married to a cis woman and she's allowing me to sleep with trans women on the side, are you interested? I would flat out say no. But so what ends up happening is they will sort of dangle this like kind of sort of romance over my head. Um and
So this is manipulative and just not okay.
Yeah, it's so I go back and forth because like is it so I think a lot of people when they're sort of trying to explore non-monogamy, I think it's sloppy. I think a lot of times and I've
hmm
seen this specifically with the cis man and cis woman who are partnered and they are sort of quote unquote allowing a bi woman to join them. I've seen that go so bad where someone in your position eventually does you know get over in quotations their reservations and then they start seeing this bi woman and then the bi woman wants to be mostly involved with the man and then there's drama that ensues there and I think a lot of people don't like they don't start thinking that that's what's going to happen, but it's like one of the risks I think of
yeah,
having
yeah,
a relationship that's open in that way because people sometimes don't know where emotions will go. Sometimes stuff happens that's like that, and I guess for me, it's like I've hated being in the situations um similar to what you've described just because it's very painful for
mm,
me to feel like um I am the person who is only can only be justified if um they're with a cis woman and only then and then will they be able to say, oh, this is a valid sort of person that I can pursue in any capacity because it fucking sucks. It really fucking
yeah. That's
sucks.
super
So I'm a
so
little I'm kind of
not
curious.
worth. Like, I'm
Oh, go on.
sure.
I'm sorry I cut you off. What did you say? I'm sorry about
Like
that.
I'm sure that makes you feel like you're not, worth as much to them because they're not willing to, put as much effort and commitment into you, and that's really really hurtful.
Yeah. But you're saying that when you've done this in the past, you guys have been super upfront about about your position and where you're going with it. So I'm curious how you phrase that and how people have reacted to it.
Uh, I mean, I didn't like police like what he said and stuff. I didn't like
Mm,
watch and personally it was it was in my bio and stuff and I talked about it up front.
mhm.
Um
But did you get like positive responses? Did it ever? I mean, a lot of people just
uh,
make profiles and nothing happens.
yeah, yeah, no, I mean the girls that I usually when I was in that situation were also poly like
Mm,
so it was yeah, like we were kind of in the same situation.
mm,
Um so I think that was yeah, I don't know, it would probably feel I'm not sure if I'd feel right dating a full on like lesbian in that situation because like she
mm,
probably would want a a full on committed relationship and I'd be worried about her developing feelings of wanting more and me not giving that to
mm.
her and like I don't know how I feel right about that.
It's interesting. So like you would have a preference for lesbians simply because you assume that they might. Oh no, you would not have a preference for lesbians simply because you assume they might
Yeah,
want
that would,
more.
unless they're like very explicit, hey, like I'm only looking for, very casual fun right now or whatever. Like,
Mm-hmm.
um, maybe then I would consider it. But typically speaking, someone who's already poly and stuff would be easier for me.
Mm.
To Now I will totally date on like lesbians monogamously as well. Like that's fine too.
Yeah, totally. No, but I get what you mean. Where like there's you feel like there's a bit more of a pressure for it to be more than what it is if when you're pursuing a lesbian woman in that context.
Yeah, because I just don't. I don't know. If feelings develop, I don't want to be hurting her if I'm like the only person in her life.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, I feel like it's all comes down to how you communicate it, because like I feel like there's ways to communicate it, and people who would be down. I mean, that's always my frustration with most of this is like there's ways to communicate shit, and people would be down if they knew what they were signing up for. There's going to be people who aren't,
Hmm.
but there are people who are going to be down, and then of course there's always like people who start to do stuff, and then the feelings they develop and then they have to end it because of that. I've been in that too where
Yeah.
I have like a really clear cut sort of thing and then someone develops feelings or I develop feelings. Like I've been on
Hmm.
multiple sides of that where I've had we're just sort of having sex sort of dynamic with somebody and then they develop feelings and I don't really know where to go with it because I didn't have an interest in more than that. um
Yeah,
you
that's
know
kind of awkward.
yeah, it is
Um,
pretty awkward. But sometimes that's how it ends up. So
yeah, but if I ever feel like someone is getting more feelings than that for me, like I would honestly end it too, like because I
yeah,
would not want to feel like I'm exploiting them, like exploiting their, stronger feelings than that.
yeah.
I'm not there for them in that way.
And you know what though? I feel like that's probably a bit of a difference between men and women a little bit because I feel like a lot of the men that I've dated who have put me in that position, they kind of enjoy the amount of like closeness that I'm having to them. And they kind of enjoy that like I'm really interested in connecting with them in that way, but they can't give it to me. They like that sort of emotional thing. Sometimes I think, you know. I think women are less likely to be okay with that. Just in my observation, I could be wrong.
Yeah, I mean, gosh, I don't know like what can be done about those people who are those men who are like treating you that way.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, we ain't got no solutions here. It's
solutions are so big. The solutions are restructuring society to not see trans women as less acceptable partners
yeah,
than cis women.
yeah, yeah,
Um, and you can't just pinpoint that till just like, okay, we just need to educate all the
yeah,
because that's
yeah.
not
Like
going to work. It's not one
it's not an
person's
easy
fault. It's
fix.
everything.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm gonna
All
take another
right. Well, I
call.
should. Yeah, let's get to somebody else. Let someone else talk. All that good stuff.
Yes. Yes, we've got 26 people on the line, so I am going to take another call. What
Oh
is your
my
name
goodness.
again?
My name is Brenna.
Brenna. Thank you so much for calling. Did you comment, by the way?
What?
Did you leave a comment? I think I saw someone who has a similar name in the comments.
No, no,
Oh,
I don't think
okay.
I ever have.
Oh, okay. Well, thank you for calling in. It was lovely speaking to you
Yeah.
either way.
Thank you so much for doing this. It's really helpful to hear people talking about it.
Yeah, I'm so excited to hear more. So,
Yeah, lots to learn into this. Thank you so much and have a great day.
all right, bye.
Bye.
All right. So there are some people who I'm seeing who are new and are wondering why I'm only wanting to hear from non men right now. It's because we did a 3 hour long call in show yesterday where I heard from exclusively men, with the exception of Lindsay Ellis. Um, and so, yeah, I mean, I was not expecting for men to be that, that vocal and that present, but I'm glad that they were. I will probably end up editing I don't know how I'm gonna do it. I might end up doing one. I don't know if I'll do one big video, big um call in stream edit thing, or if I'll do two different ones for this one and the last one. But yeah, I'm hoping that we will have a better use of our time here. We're already hitting an hour. And that is the second call that we've taken. Oh, I'm trying not to be. I can't be here for. My partner's coming over at 5, so I can't be here. I can probably be here for exactly 3 hours. But I would like to not do that. But yes, let's take some more calls. I'm really excited to get into this. The more I'm thinking about it, the better I feel about let's make these True Tea podcasts every other week, or we'll have the call-in show. I mean, there'll be content every week, but we'll have the podcast and the call-in show the next week, and then rinse and repeat. I'm thinking that will probably be how it is, because this is going to be a doozy to edit. But anyway, let's get into the next caller. A doozy to edit. Hello. Anyway, caller.
Hi.
Hey there. Who am I speaking to?
You're talking to American Book Dragon. You hired my comment. It has a lime green icon.
Ooh. Well, I'm so glad that you can call in. Can you share what your comment was? I'm forgetting exactly what it is. So could you share what your comment was? Or like the gist of it?
I said that I don't like having conversations about what it's like to be bisexual. The problems I'll mention are going to be immediately dismissed in one way or another. I gave up. I got pushed into silence. I think that's very common. And as I said, the conversations I've had about bisexuality boil down to, you haven't had these traumatic experiences to look at how good at you got it, without actually digging into what traumatic experiences I've actually had, nor the unique experiences that pertain to bisexuality itself. And I'm tired of that conversation, which leads nowhere. It just makes me more insecure about my sexuality.
I do remember that comment. So I'm assuming you're calling in to give us more True Tea about that, because that's a really good perspective. So I would love to hear a bit more about it.
So it's a little complicated as to why I went silent. To make my story short, my childhood was not that far off from being tied to a pole in the basement, except we didn't have a basement and my pole was the internet. So the internet raised me more than my parents did. A lot of the people who had the privilege of being in school and having a lot of social interaction and dated a lot of people, I didn't have that. I still don't have that. So I really feel like I cannot speak to the experience of being a normal person in general.
You're definitely not alone in that, because a lot of people feel like they were raised by the internet and that is their main source of socialization with people, for sure.
Yeah. So I ended up exploring my sexuality by being groomed by pedophiles on the internet. So because of that, I don't know how to even articulate any of that trauma that comes with being fetishized by people who should honestly be in jail right now.
Yeah.
But yeah, I'm just like, it's like I'm constantly offended by so many of the arguments and stereotypes that come against bisexuality. So I don't know how to respond in a lot of ways. If I explain my bisexuality in one way, I second guess myself and I look for ways to protect myself. And eventually I just have to drop away from the conversation entirely. Like, what truth can I really say without being attacked in one way or another?
Yeah. You feel invalidation from all sides.
Yeah. So, I don't know. I escaped my situation from my parents by marrying a man, and we've been married for 12 years now.
Oh, congratulations.
And yeah. And, my white privilege became very obvious when I got away from my parents and joined society again. It's just like, you
night and day. Holy shit, I get to do so much. But bisexual privilege has never been obvious. It's a little triggering to even just go down that lane in my head, I suppose.
Mm. I'm sort of curious how you how would you personally define what other people are describing as bisexual privilege, and why do you disagree with that? I'm just curious because
It's hiding. It's hiding. That's
hiding.
what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's being in the closet, and being in the closet sucks just for your mental health in general. And, you know, basically being told that my white privilege is I don't know. It's just like being told that hiding is a white privilege. I'm sorry, not white privilege, bisexual privilege.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just so odd to even, I don't know, contemplate that.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, we're going down this road of conversation because of the idea that I can hold my partner's hand in public.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's basically the entire idea behind bisexual privilege.
Yeah.
Okay. How much more do bisexuals get abused by their partners than straight women? It's more. it's more than straight women. We're excluded from many queer spaces. We're erased from existence often, and in many cases forced into two separate closets depending on who we're with.
Mm.
And we're more likely to be poor single moms than lesbians are.
Mm.
But that's not even coming into the conversation for some reason. You know, it's just that, well, you get to hold your hand in public with your husband. Great. How's he treating you at home?
Mm.
So I don't really like the term.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a question about, I think one of the general issues with a lot of this conversation is this idea of, you know, someone has it better than someone else, and that therefore everything must be hunky dory. You know, like a lot of these conversations are, you know, this person has been able to live an easier life than I have, therefore that person has privilege, which I think works in a lot of other ways. But, you know, as I said, I don't think privilege is the right word for it, because that doesn't seem correct, you know, at all. Because
Yeah.
it's, I don't, you know, it's not, like I love that Savvy brought up the statistics about by women in mental health and domestic violence, because those are conversations that aren't often being had. And there's also, you know, there's an incredible amount of domestic violence that happens when women date women as well. You know, I feel like sometimes people have the desire to say more when I want to say it's just different. You know, it's different, and they're in these, you know, and it sounds like by folks in general just deal with alienation in a way where they don't feel like they can get help. Is that a correct read, where you feel like when you're going through stuff as a bi woman, you can't turn to the queer people, you can't turn to the straight people? It's kind of a thing you have to deal with on your own.
I mean, I have, you know, complex PTSD. That's
Okay.
the way I describe it is that it's like I am in a ball pit of toxic memories, and each ball is draining, and I have to dissociate just to function day to day.
Mm-hmm.
And to be told that I don't have trauma in the right way is just kind of just odd, you know. And I also, I have that doubt though, because I have been so isolated from other people. I have not been to a gay bar in my entire life. So I don't know. But,
Yeah, it's complex, and I obviously don't want to ask more about trauma, but I think people don't talk about the trauma that a lot of bi women have experienced and don't discuss. Um, you know.
I mean, I have to think about all the pedophiles that I discussed my sexuality with anytime I go down the road of bisexuality. That's not that's part of the reason I avoid the issue. Just, I don't want to think about that. Unfortunately, I don't have the mental capacity to just dig into that every day. And hiding with my husband is essentially what I would call it, because I'm home from the world here. I don't trust the fucking world, and honestly, I get more flack, though. I will admit, I get more flack for him being 20 years older.
Okay.
That's a whole other ball, I would say, in the ball pit. But, my experience is, people on the internet telling me that bisexuals are the reason why straight people have HIV.
Yeah. I've heard that too.
Just anything that is bad, any bad thought about bisexuality just tends to be on the internet. And I was raised by it. So you get what I'm saying. I'm getting
so because you've been raised by the internet, because one of the things I didn't really get when I started having vague conversations about bisexuality is that there is a whole discourse happening online about bi folks that I was not fully aware of. People are always telling me about the great bi pan debate on Tumblr that happened, that schisms were made and things. And I can see how, especially being a person who relies a lot on the internet, how, that these conversations are digested more fiercely by you, because apparently it is that intense online.
Yeah, I once got into a turf war with turf, on this website that's a popular political website, and they discovered I was bisexual afterwards, and just chewed into me after that.
That was viewed as a flaw.
Yeah. People are like, oh, it's great that you get to choose. It's like, I don't fucking choose to be bisexual here, guys.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's what I thought to come and say, because it's the word just doesn't fit.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you for calling in and giving more thought about that, because that is definitely a topic that people aren't discussing. And just as somebody who's creating internet content, I probably do need to think a bit more about people like yourself who they so rarely hear about bi folks being spoken about in a positive way. And I don't want to create stuff that is hurtful. Obviously these conversations are rough, but I don't want it to be the reason why a bi person resents their bisexuality.
I mean, it's a good conversation, because I went down that rabbit hole after Lindsay Ellis's video as well. Of just, wait, is it a privilege? Is it not? And I just don't trust myself to go one way or another to confirm anything, because it is complex.
Yeah.
I obviously have privileges. I'm going to college right now, and my husband's paying for it. That's not a thing everyone gets. And I don't know that it. I don't know what else to say.
Oh, well, I mean, well, that's okay. We have a lot more callers to get to, but I really appreciate you calling in and for get going into more detail about this because like I said, it's a very vital part of the conversation.
All right. Well, thank you for having me on.
Thank you for calling on. All
All
right.
right. Bye.
Bye. That was lovely. Very rough conversation. Very, very rough conversation. Super happy that they were able to call in and have the conversation with me. I'm realizing that when I take new calls, people are often playing me in the background, and I'm gonna pit that's it's gonna get picked up on the audio when I edit this. So I'm going to be quiet for a couple of beats before I answer the next call so that maybe it doesn't go through all the way. So just be aware of that. I think we're making pretty decent time. Maybe we've been here for an hour and 10 minutes. We'll see. We'll see. There's some really interesting conversations going on in the chat. Y'all are talking about, somebody says, um, lesbian women have some male privilege as they're perceived. Oof, let's not go into that. That's, oof. This privilege word sometimes it gets away from us, I think. All right, I'm gonna give it a couple of beats. Okay. Hello.
Hello.
Hi, who am I speaking to?
Hi, Kat. My name is Natalie. I'm a cis bi woman, and I'm also a biracial Black woman. And I was in the chat yesterday, and I also commented on your video.
Yes, yes. You finally got through. I'm so glad that you finally got through because I saw your comments and actually, I don't know if YouTube zapped it or not, but there was like a comment you left that is no longer available that I saw that was really great. And I screenshot it. And I think in the ultimate, that I did a couple days ago, I did like a pre-recording intro to this, and I think I might have read it or not, but it was a really, really good comment, and you expressed some great things. So let's talk about your comments and your true tea. I would love for you to share your perspective.
Oh, awesome. Thank you. I have like notes here, so hopefully I can stay on topic and like get it out. Okay, cool. So we could get on to another caller. But I don't know if this had to do with anything in the comment that I left, but I wanted to comment on Lindsay's comparisons of being white passing and straight passing from yesterday, because I've seen that comparison before. And I think the comparison is inaccurate, but it's sort of valuable as an explanation because I've experienced both of those things. And I can definitely say that white passing privilege as a biracial Black woman is not the same as straight passing privilege when you primarily frame it around bisexuality, because I found that saying only bi people experience straight passing privilege is biphobic, especially because it's usually the biggest conversation around bisexuality in the queer community. And it perpetuates really alienating stereotypes about bi people. Plus, it sort of gives other queer folks a pass. Like, they experience their own privileges within queerness, including straight passing. So it's sort of frustrating that bi people take the brunt of that conversation. And a lot of the previous callers and commenters mentioned this, but straight passing privilege isn't informed solely by your partner. A lot of it is gender presentation, mannerism, race, class. So it feels disingenuous to frame it around being bi. And it's honestly more of like respectability politics than anything. Like white corporate gays have privilege in the way their queerness is perceived by cishet society. And I feel like I have more straight passing privilege because I'm femme presenting and light skinned and not because I'm bi. I have friends who are bi women and femmes who get profiled as queer even when they're with their cis boyfriends. And it's not because they're bi, it's because they're Black women who are gender nonconforming. I can definitely say being sometimes white passing, because of course white passing is conditional and whatever, and a light-skinned Black person, regardless of the fetishization I experience in my individual relationships with men, there are systemic benefits that I gain because of colorism and racism in the Black community. But when I'm experiencing racism, I know that other Black people have my back. And I also get the sense when I'm in Black spaces that if I wanted to insert myself, I could and have the mic even when I don't need it. But I do not feel that way about being bi in the queer community. And oftentimes the call is coming from inside the house when it comes to biphobia.
Yeah.
Yeah. Here, let me find my, I feel this pressure to like keep the conversation moving and get all of my words out.
No, you've got this down. You're going there, and I love every moment.
I have my notes. I'm prepared. I definitely experience a combination of like advantages and disadvantages when I'm dating a cis man. But I'm monogamous, and my queerness is important to my identity. So I tell all of my partners that I'm bi, and then I do experience privilege because I am femme presenting, but I experience biphobia from my cis male partners, from fetishization or the idea that I'm like loose or hypersexual. And I related to one of the previous callers, I can't remember who it was, but also to what you were saying about not being like long-term material, because I can't divorce my queerness from myself, even when I'm dating a cis man. Like if I'm at home with his family and they ask me about my previous partners, then it's people, it's trans people, it's women, it's gender non-conforming people. And of course, like my friends, like the people I hang out with, the queer community is like a big part of my life, and I can't divorce myself from it. And then when I go to the queer community, I experience biphobia both like online and in real life, which really sucks. Like I mentioned earlier how I know in Black spaces that I'll have a space to speak even when I don't necessarily need it, but I don't feel that way at all about the queer spaces I've been. I go to a women's college, and I have been in queer spaces, like specifically the queer org on my campus, and cis lesbians in that space can come and openly say wildly biphobic things about bi women. And I'm and other bi women in the space are essentially put on the hot seat to defend our identity. And in the way that historically there are systemic privileges for lighter skinned Black people or for white passing people, historically there has been a lot of biphobic scholarship that has essentially been canonized by the queer community. Like a lot of the scholarship surrounding like political lesbianism, like the fact that bi men are widely blamed for the spread of AIDS. So it doesn't feel systemic. It feels like cis monosexual queer folks have had the microphone for most of the queer rights movement from the mid 20th century to now. And you might see in the modern times like a cis bi woman with a husband who might have the mic, and people might question that. But for most of queer history, that has not been the case, and we see that with the bi discourse happening now. It can be traced back to those biphobic ideas from like the 70s and 80s. So whether I'm dating a straight man, a lesbian, any non-bi person, I'm essentially opening myself up to violence, and it's frustrating. So I can see why other bi folks, especially non-men, would feel triggered by these conversations around straight passing privilege, because it's the only time bisexuality is brought up by the wider queer community. And it silences conversation about the needs of bi people as a minority, as a part of the queer community that is experiencing discrimination from cishet people, experiencing high rates of intimate partner violence, depression, et cetera, all the things that were mentioned on the last call. And it's just like, what is the point of constantly acknowledging my privilege when I'm also experiencing oppressions and I'm trying to talk about them in my own community and constantly getting shut down? Like, what is the point of even having community at that point?
Yeah,
I'm done spieling. So thanks for
no, yeah, and you did a really good job. I was wondering if you could speak a bit more about the needs of bi folks, because someone was commenting about studies that were done about what sort of, support financially was put aside to support bi folks specifically, and apparently it was less than 1%. I don't know whether or not that is true, but that sounds like something that is true. So I'm really curious if you could speak more to like what the needs of bi folks are.
Yeah, I can. I can't speak on that specific statistic, but I would believe it. Like, I definitely think that bisexuality as a concept, along with pansexuality, is really misunderstood in the way people talk about it. And it's obvious when you get like the stereotypes of like bi people are loose, or like it's like you have to pick a side. And so just giving bi people more room to create scholarship and like letting bi people talk about their experiences in queer spaces, you find that bi people both have like very unique, specific experiences of bisexuality, because it is sort of divorced. I wouldn't say divorced, but it's like it's different enough from queer monosexualities that like it is its own experience, but it's like we have a lot of things in common. Like bi women are experiencing comp het. I know that's a big like topic on the internet of like, is comp het only a lesbian thing? But bi women are experiencing it. And I think that just like allowing room, especially in like queer activist spaces or queer scholarship spaces, for bi people to integrate the scholarship that's already happened into like the wider canon of queer scholarship would be really helpful. And just like not like it's the automatic assumption that bi people are outsiders, and that like the fact that privilege is always the first thing that comes up in the conversation. It's this feeling of like you could have your gay card ripped away at any moment. So you bi people, you better do right by monosexual queer people. It's like, I don't want to feel that way anymore when I come into queer spaces. Bi people have always been allies with other queer people. Bi people have always been gender nonconforming. There's always been bi trans people and bi non-binary people. So like, I just want to see their needs addressed. I want to see them get more chance to speak. I want to see, especially people of color, women of color who are bi, get more chance to talk. And yeah, I just think stop the suspicion around bi people needs to go away.
Yeah. I don't know if this is too much of a personal thing, but I'm actually really curious what you're talking about a specific situation in your school where a lesbian woman said some really biphobic shit. Just in the interest of, myself understanding more about biphobia, and maybe even people in my audience understanding more about biphobia, what were those things that were said, if you feel comfortable sharing?
Yeah, it happened when I was the first year, and my roommate, who unfortunately she's not here right now, I think she has a better memory of it than I did, but I remember we were having like a presentation from the leader of the group at the time about like different labels. And this was sort of, it wasn't like, it was definitely at the tail end of MoGI, like in terms of like the internet, but it was certainly like the presentation was around like, not necessarily micro labels, but like labels beyond straight and gay and cis and trans. And there was, people were, as soon as labels like bi or pan came up in the presentation, like people who were not bi or pan had a lot to say. And it talked about, there's been lots of conversations of like, oh, I'd never date a bi girl, but then these same girls would turn around and say, oh yeah, I tried to turn my straight roommate. And it's like the energy that you have is awful.
Yeah, I find that so interesting. Yeah.
And it's just tiring that we are making space for this when bi people do have actual experiences and needs that should be addressed by the queer community. It's like, if the queer community is about solidarity of people who don't fit into heteronormative society, then like bi people deserve a space in that. And this being the conversation around bi-ness is so exhausting.
Yeah. I'm curious more about, because somebody actually left this comment about how bi women don't experience comp het, and I found that fascinating, because in my like just experience, it's like, okay, but how don't they? Because like,
right,
like I feel like so many of the bi women I know have definitely experienced that, like, oh shit, I guess I'm still interested in men, but I think my feelings weren't what I thought they were. You know, and that's just I don't it's I have no understanding of where that's coming from. So just out of my own
Yeah.
curiosity, could you talk a bit more like what the argument for that would be? Like why wouldn't bi women experience comp het?
Yeah. There's a great, I know people have been mentioning it in the comments, but there's this great YouTuber, Verily Bitchy, who's done a bunch of videos about this topic. But just like a summary both from those videos and like what I've seen personally is that obviously bi women and also ace women experience comp het because society is telling you be sexually attracted to men, and any feeling that is against that, whether it's being attracted to women or not being attracted to anyone at all, is confusing. So why wouldn't bi and ace women experience comp het? But I think there's this idea that because bi women technically can experience attraction to men, that they don't experience the same feeling of comp het that bi women do. And it also traces a lot back to the lesbian comp het master doc, which is a whole other debate. But I see a lot of discourse, especially on apps like Twitter and TikTok, which are cesspools of useless discourse of like, this is a thing that's only for lesbians. Only lesbians experience this. And it's like, and every time a bi woman tries to say, oh, I experience this too, immediately shut down. Like, even if, like, my roommate who I was talking about before, she commented on an ace lesbian's TikTok where she was talking about experiencing discrimination from other lesbians. And my roommate is aspec, and she was like, I'm a bi aspec woman, and I have also experienced that feeling because I'm ace. And everyone was like, no, it's because she's a lesbian. Get out of here. You don't know what you're talking about. This feeling of like gatekeeping by women, especially from WLW spaces, as though like there's no possible overlap in experience at all. And it's like, this isn't for the protection of lesbians. This feels like oppression Olympics of like, lesbians have it worse, stop talking. It's like, I'm not trying to say that bi women have it worse. It's just that you have had the microphone for so long and we are in the same community, and it feels like you just are so comfortable invalidating the experiences of bi women and refusing to listen to them. And it's toxic, and it's this level of animosity that I can't speak on lesbophobia from bi women because I don't know what everyone's thinking at the same time. But it's like, the energy that I'm seeing from bi women is not the same as the energy that I'm seeing from the cis lesbian community on the internet, at least when it comes to that type of discourse.
And do you think a lot of that has to do with like these sort of like gold star ideas of like, we don't want women who've ever had any interaction with a penis to ever be in this conversation?
Oh yeah, totally. It's definitely that gross like gold star. I part of me hesitates to like connect it to TERFs because it feels sort of like minimizing to what trans women go through. And you can speak on this obviously, but minimizing to connect like other oppressions to what TERFs are against.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it feels that way of sort of like your interaction with penis, your consensual interaction with penis is invalidating the fact that you love other women. And it's like, that's not true. And think about it like this, right? Like, if you have a woman and she has sex with a man and she realizes like, oh, I'm a lesbian, I don't like men, then, that's fine. And that is seen as that interaction, it's like, oh, that was in the past. She's moved on from it. She didn't gain anything from it. But as a bi woman, I've had those interactions in the past, and it's like, yep, I still also love women. And it's like, how is that not also a valid WLW experience of I had sex with a man and I realized, yep, I love women. I thought the whole reason that we had solidarity is because we love women, not that we hate men, and specifically hate penis, which has nothing to do with my love of women. Like, what are you talking about? It comes off as like you're inching towards being transphobic, but you haven't gotten there yet. And we also see it with the way that they're constantly moving the goalpost of like what counts, quote unquote, what counts as being a lesbian, like what type of person you date counts as being a lesbian, how you're like, do bi lesbians exist? Do ace lesbians exist? Like, at what point do you stop being a lesbian? And like the moving of that goalpost signals this sort of like change in the conversation around like, what is the point of this identity? Is it for solidarity or is it for gatekeeping other people?
Yeah. I'm remembering that you expressed you disagreed with the sort of thing that I said about I think I mentioned how, because I'm always thinking from things from a million different perspectives, because that's just the way my brain works.
Oh yeah,
And
totally.
and I sort of said, even though I disagree, obviously, well, I don't know how obvious. I think it's obvious, but I expressed that I can understand how a lesbian woman would have anxiety around dating bi women when her experience is mostly bi women being only connected to them in a very shallow, brief sexual way, and they've watched those bi women who they've probably been very close to being in long-term relationships with cis men. Because I can understand why that would sort of make some lesbian women be like, this is something I need to just be, aware of or thoughtful about. And I was actually curious if you could talk a bit more about that and like your specific disagreement, because a couple of people linked that particular segment and they're like, just so you know, Kat, this was biphobic specifically. So.
Oh yeah, totally. Yeah. I definitely think like I thought that part of the video really stuck out to me because it's like that feeling isn't coming from nowhere, like like women who speak on that experience aren't lying about like, oh, a bi woman hurt me, or I felt like a bi woman who I dated chose heteronormativity over what we had. And I don't think that it's 100% like, it's not 100% biphobic to just to talk about your experience. Like that's stupid. But there's definitely, it feels biphobic because one, it feels it does feel controlling in a way to be that concerned with who like your partner's other partners are, not in the sense of like being protective of your heart or being protective of, am I being fetishized? Am I being taken advantage of? Definitely as a light-skinned Black woman, I can talk about seeing who your partners go with after you. It's like, oh, of course, this is a pattern.
Yeah.
But it feels controlling in that, it's a misunderstanding of bi-ness as a concept. It's like whenever you date a bi person, they could end up with someone of a different gender than you, and before or after they date you, and that's part of the bi experience. And certainly it certainly it's not invalid to speak on how that might make you uncomfortable as a queer person to see someone else having an experience where it looks from the outside like they're jumping back and forth from queerness back into heteronormativity. But it's, like I said, it's just part of being bi. And I feel like if there was more discussion from bi people about how how dating works, how relationships work, how they feel about their sexuality, then there would be less mysticism around it. And I was going to say something else and it left my brain. Oh my goodness, I knew this would happen. That's why I had notes.
I mean, so it's interesting because like I've like, first of all, bi folks experience bisexuality in like so many different ways, like
yeah,
I've known bi women who very like they know for a fact, and this is the way that they live their life, that they will only have these sort of sexual relationships with women and then these long-term relationships with men. And I don't know if maybe they're saying that to me because they know that they're not going to date me, and maybe they're more upfront with me than maybe they are their partners. I don't know. I have no clue. You know, but knowing that that's how some people feel, um I can see how, being a lesbian, you would just be like, well, shit, I need to be super aware of that. Because maybe I don't want, like, coming to what the previous caller mentioned, like, maybe I, as a lesbian, want more from this relationship. And maybe I need to be aware of that. And, I don't know. I think it's such a complicated thing because, there's at what point does that anxiety or concern become biphobic, and at what point is that them reaching to their previous experience and saying, this hurt me, and so I'm going to either have a boundary or feel or express discomfort? Because I think that that's where it gets a little messy, because people
Yeah.
You know, somebody left a comment that was like, all right, so bi women have had their experience with lesbian women who have often made them feel like they were, you know, apparently, and for some bi women, when they date lesbian women, they're told a lot that they're just going to about the possibility of them leaving them for a man, and that's a lot. And for some bi women, they've decided not to date lesbian women just because of that experience. And for some, so there's like, that's valid, but then the experience that a lot of lesbian women have had of dating a bi woman who only has sex with them, that's biphobic. But the former thing isn't quite. And I thought that was kind of an interesting kind of point. So
Mm.
it's complicated. I'm curious if you had more thoughts on that, because
Yeah,
there's
it
so
is.
many.
I'll try to keep my thoughts short, if, but I definitely, that is an interesting conversation to have about like where is the line where it becomes biphobic, where is the line when it becomes lesbophobic, when it's an individual person's experience.
Mm-hmm.
And it definitely, I do think it has to do with a lot with other intersecting privileges of like being cis or being white, and how much access you have to dating other people, especially because something that a caller yesterday mentioned actually about like privilege and dating access, of like, if you're a white cis lesbian, then you might have a lot of dating access in your community that you, I wouldn't say you take for granted, but that, you know, that a Black bi woman might not experience in her community or within the queer community as a whole. And I do think that there is within queer spaces a power imbalance of monosexual cis people having stronger knit senses of community, because once again of the being at the forefront of queer liberation, being sort of the loudest voices in the room for a very long time. And I think that's sort of where my feeling as a bi woman comes from, of leaning towards biphobia so quickly, is that I've just seen it so often, and so many times, especially on the internet, but in real life as well, seeing conversations where people are saying that's lesbophobic, where it's just bi women talking. So it sets something off in me, and I think that other bi women can speak to that feeling of feeling silenced in WLW communities, and that it creates this sad and really destructive tension between lesbians and bi women that is not helpful for queer liberation at all. And it's certainly not solely on the shoulders of lesbians to be the ones to bring everyone together, but there is definitely that power imbalance where it's like, I need all cis monosexual, and I mean, you know, not just cis, but it's mainly cis monosexual queer people to stop to analyze their internalized biphobia. And it's not like a condition of me not being lesbophobic, but because that's dumb. But at the same time, I need you to examine these things, because going back and forth hurting each other is not helping either of us, you know?
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is we just need more unity in general.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I totally
saw
agree.
that stupid. I saw that stupid. It's on Twitter, but that stupid, like, it's a TikTok thing. I'm sure that it's like young kids, but they were like, they put together like the men who love men and women who love women flags, and they're like, look at this cool flag. And then someone in the comments was like, this looks like the middle of it looks like the bi flag. And then everyone's like, go away, bi person. It's not about you. Stop making it about you.
Oh, God.
It's like, why can't bi people make it about them sometimes? You know, please. I'm just waiting.
Well, I really appreciate you calling in and giving us all of your true tea. You are a really, really great caller, and I'm so glad you enlightened
thank you so much,
me
Kat.
and so many other people. The chat is a huge fan of you. I'm glad.
Thanks, chat.
I apologize for making you wait so long yesterday and then not getting to you.
Oh, it was okay.
I'm so
I
glad
had a fun
that
time
you managed.
yesterday. I've been a fan of you since I was in middle school, I think. And I'm 23 now, so I can, I can wait. I'll wait. But it was so nice to talk to you. I'm so glad to hear everybody else's perspectives, and it's been fun.
Yeah, thank you so much for calling in. I'm gonna take another caller, but next
Thank
time
you
we
so
have
much
a
for
topic
having
you feel
me.
like calling in for, please
Oh
please
yes,
feel
I
free.
love to talk. I'm an Aquarius, so you can't shut me up.
I love that. All right,
Thanks,
bye.
Kat.
What a lovely caller. We've hit 1 hour and 40 seconds, or 40 minutes. Wow. It is so hot. I don't know where y'all are, but in California, it's hot. This is why I'm so glad that we're doing this as like a podcast audio thing, because I am butt fucking naked right now. I am naked. I look real, real, real strange. And we are just having, a very productive time. And I'm so thankful that all the callers so far have been together and just, said their piece. And we've been, sis, there's a difference between this one and the last one. That's all I'll say. I won't say anything more than that, but there's a bit of a difference. I'm gonna refresh my drink and I'll be right back. So I'm all the way out of ginger ale. All I have now is this is root beer, ginger root beer. So, all right. How long will this go on? So I'm going to be here. I would really like to not have a habit of doing 3-hour long call-in shows. But, I mean, I still feel like there's more conversations to be had. I feel, I have to do like an inventory of like the ground that we've covered, because I feel like we have covered a lot of ground. So we'll see how much longer this goes. Like I said, I am seeing my partner at 5. Let me make sure that I've got my phone near me. Be right back. All right. All right. Sorry, just you see here all my notifications. Okay, so is it ginger beer, or it's ginger root beer by Zevia? It's quite refreshing, and it's got zero everything. It doesn't have anything in it. It's got 0 calories, 0 total fat, 0 sodium, 0 carbs, 0 sugars. It's honestly Zevia's, of all of the there's nothing in it sodas, they're the best. They're the absolute best. So if you're looking to like drink soda but not drink soda, yeah. All right. Anyway, we're gonna take a couple more calls. I don't know if we're going to be here for the full 3 hours, because honestly, these calls have been so good at covering a lot of the bases that I wanted to cover. So we'll see how I feel. But I obviously want to get a range of opinions and perspectives. So we'll see. We'll take a couple more calls. All right. Let me stop talking, and then I'll we have to do the thing we said we were going to do. Silent for a couple of beats, and then we'll. Hello?
Oh, hello?
Hi, who am I speaking
Oh,
to?
can you hear me?
I can hear
Oh,
you.
Stephanie. Oh, my name is Stephanie.
Oh, hi, Stephanie. Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Toronto.
Oh my God, another Canadian. I love it. I love
Yes.
that we're learning that people can call from other countries. That makes me so happy.
Yeah. Can we get started? Sorry.
Yeah. What is your true tea?
Yeah. So I want to keep this short because I know that people are calling in. But anyway, so I'm a somewhat recent, but I mean, I'll say that my bisexual identity kind of came later in life. I didn't know it from 8 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm a woman. I'm a cis woman and a Black woman. In terms of the topic of straight passing privilege, I don't know. I think that the conveniences of being seen as straight don't always protect you from violence. They don't always protect you from discrimination or dehumanization or fetishization. So I think privilege is a very structural macro word, where the conveniences are very micro and very personal and interpersonal. So I find that term to be not very, it's not the right term to use. And maybe I'm being repetitive here in what I'm saying, but I think it's important to think of privilege as being structural, as being things, these systems that oppress people, you know? Like I remember when we had that horrific tragedy, I'm forgetting where, but the man that went to all these spas and killed all these Asian women, that there was like some, not all, but some discourse, people saying, well, Black people were like Black Lives Matter in June and last year, and where are they now? And it's like, it's like, you know, it's like that meme where it's like, well, why, I'm just sitting here, why am I being open to this? You know, Black people can't oppress, you know, Asian people structurally, because at the end of the day, white supremacy is Sauron. And I feel like we should all be looking to Sauron and saving our energy for Sauron, who is the big bad of all of this, you know?
Yeah.
And I think that when we have these conversations about privilege, it should be like, no, it's not about privilege, it's about the fact that having to deny a part of yourself, having to sort of, you know, perform your sexuality to sort of, you know, have bona fides and sort of be like, oh, so that's the right kind of, you know, bi person, the right kind of straight person, the right kind of gay person, is exhausting. It's defeating. It can really mess with your mental health and really mess with how you view yourself. And that's not good. That's not okay. And we are all basically fighting for the same things. So, I mean, personally, I don't necessarily have like an issue with the term privilege. I just don't think it's conducive to all of our liberation. Like the only way we'll be free is if we tear down these structures and tear down these systems that oppress us all.
Yeah, because I think an interesting point that some people have made is that we're all sort of talking about this as though it is like on the onus of bi folks, but we're all really talking about like heterosexism and how like people are navigating in the, you know, through life trying to avoid homophobia and being targeted, and like that is you know, that is the big bad that we're not discussing here as much as we're discussing by folks' choices or preferences.
Exactly. I definitely agree with that. I think, you know, I mean, personally, I think I've come to the point where I'm never going to, or at least I'm getting better at not really caring about how I'm viewed by either gay people, straight people, whatever people. I'm no longer, to sort of quote kind of Crystal from the Read, you know, I don't fully care that I'm not fully homosexual or fully heterosexual, because F y'all.
F both y'all.
I don't know what you yeah, because I don't know what you want me to do with that. I mean, I'm never going to stop being bi. I'm never going to stop existing. I do exist. There is so much evidence that bisexuality exists. And if you have a problem with that, I would really suggest that you because I don't want to be too harsh in my dragging, because
Be harsh.
I think a lot of it's a trauma response. A lot of times it is a trauma response, but
yeah.
But at the same time, don't use whatever trauma you've had experience in your life to put that shit on me, because it's not about me. I have nothing to do with this. I'm living my life and I'm happy,
Yeah.
And if you have a problem with that, if you can, and this is not always accessible, but if you can, go see a therapist and talk to a therapist about that. And I think we don't always get to choose how we feel in the moment instinctually, but we get to choose how we react and how we treat others and how we cultivate our ideas beyond those initial feelings of instinct, right?
Yeah.
So you may see, for example, this is an example, right? By the way, as a lesbian, you may be dating a bi woman, and then maybe you feel like, or you have the idea that she's gonna go to the straight man, and you feel some type of way. That's fine, feel that way, but realize that it's not true for every bi woman. It's not true for every dynamic. That's similar, and that maybe whatever feelings you have are your feelings, and they're valid, and we're all being oppressed for the same things, and it's hard out here, and I get it, but there's a larger social contract that you can't use as a way to, like whatever experiences you've had, you can't be like, okay, well, this is now how I move through the world. And that's not okay, because the way you move through the world with that kind of mentality will also inevitably hurt someone else who will then have more trauma. And it's just the same cycle repeating itself. And we're all the worse for it. We're all feeling horrible because of it. And we need to break that cycle.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of people are screaming out in pain and frustration. And I think that, a lot of people who have these arguments are having them from a place of, I've been hurt several times over. And that's why I feel how I feel. I mean, at least that's kind of my outside observation of a lot of the bi discourse on the internet specifically. It just, seems like a lot of people are hurt and lashing out at the wrong people, really.
Definitely. I mean, I definitely feel that way. I feel that way, and not to get a bit off topic, but I feel that way whenever certain groups blame Black people, or they feel some way when Black people get a bit of shine.
Yeah.
It's like, it's the white people in power that are the problem. Save that energy for them.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, kind of that the connection you're making, it's not really, Black people's fault that Black folks managed to organize and have conversations about racism in a way that a lot of Asian communities haven't been able to in the past. We're not to blame. We're both talking about racism here.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so it's kind of it's misdirected anger for sure.
Yes, I think it's definitely, I think, whatever we feel is definitely valid, or it exists, and we shouldn't deny it. But I think we need to be able to categorize our conversations between interpersonal, anecdotal experiences, and sort of be able to, in a more removed sense, talk about structural issues differently.
Yeah.
Because if we don't tackle, destroying these systems of oppression in a very, targeted way, then nothing will ever change. We'll be having these same conversations 100 years from now, and that's exhausting, and that's quite frankly very depressing. I want to, be 80, about to die, knowing that, people that come after me will never have to have these conversations, will never have to experience these things.
Yeah. Yeah. And, interestingly, I'm just thinking about this now, because the theme with a couple of past calls has been that we should all unite, and maybe we need to have these these conversations in order to get there. Maybe this is part of that journey of getting to the point where people aren't being resentful of each other within the acronym.
I think so. I think you're definitely right. I think maybe having these conversations will lead us to a different way to understand these issues and talk about them. And I really hope that this will be productive in that way.
Yeah. Well, thank you for calling in and sharing your stuff with us. I know you want to keep it short, so I'm going to keep it short as well because we've still got 24 people on the line.
Oh God.
But thank you so much
It
for
was a
calling
pleasure
in.
talking with you, and it's a pleasure talking with you. I'm a recent-ish fan, so I think your stuff is.
Thank you for following me and for supporting my stuff and calling in, as a newer fan. That means a lot to me.
Oh, you're welcome. Enjoy the rest of the calls.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.
All right. That was a cute, short, little, we hit our points call. I love it. Let's see. I'm reading through comments just to sort of see how people are. First of all, I love the fact that we're on topic in the comment section. I think our first call, our first live thing. Oh no, that was the replay. People like we were talking about K-pop. Okay. Let's get another call. Hello.
Hi.
Hi there. Who am I speaking to?
Oh, my name is Maya. I'm a cis bi woman, black.
Oh, awesome. I love that we're having bi black women call in. That's amazing.
Yeah, I was like, it's really cool. I can like relate to them, like especially,
Mm-hmm. So what is your true tea?
My true tea, I mean, most of the women before me like really laid it out concisely and like way better than I could. They got to most of the points I was gonna make, but so I can really only speak to my experience. Like my personal experience is like I really realized I was bi probably like the beginning of this year. So I'm still kind of new.
Oh.
I don't really know all the terminology and stuff. So it's been a like kind of an interesting awakening. I realized it and I was like, oh, I'm not just a straight person who kind of also likes boobs. Like I'm actually bi. There's a word for it. This is what I am. And it was like exciting. And I was like, oh, I'm going to go hit the internet and I'm going to connect and get involved with everybody. And, it's going to be great. And then I jumped on to the internet and immediately was just hit by biphobia. Like
wow.
I probably just coincidentally. And I was like, oh, okay. And it was kind of just set from there. And it was a little disheartening. And so I was kind of in my feelings when this whole conversation first came up. But I think there is somewhat of a benefit. But yeah, I definitely agree that the word privilege doesn't feel appropriate, at least in the way that I understand the word privilege, because like thinking of like just white privilege, being rich, like class privilege, there's like a systematic benefit to it. Like there's a system put in place for you, and it at least to me it doesn't really seem like there's a system that is benefiting bi people. Like it just seems to benefit us in the sense that like in our proximity to straightness.
Yeah.
And so it feels weird to call it a privilege because like other women have already said, it's just like a shield. It's more like hiding. And I feel like it feels like not something that you should really be that grateful for, And like I'm not really like out. I'm not, necessarily ashamed, but like my one and only friend that I had told kind of died recently.
Oh wow.
So now I'm back to like no one knowing. Yeah. And I know that like as soon as I tell like my family, the only thing they're gonna hear is oh, so she still likes guys, you know?
Yeah.
And so it it just doesn't really feel like a privilege. I guess in a social sense, it could be, you know, like I can walk down the street, hold a guy's hand. It's not really a big deal, but then, you know, I'm still bi. I still like women. So as soon as I hold a woman's hand, it's that privilege just kind of like evaporates.
Mm-hmm.
So then, you know, how much of a privilege is it even if you have to meet these very specific guidelines and it's not always, you know, there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was curious if you could talk a bit more about hiding and what that means, because obviously I don't have the personal experience with hiding, because we've heard that a couple of times and I don't always know exactly what that means, because I guess hiding, does that mean that you potentially change yourself in order to not seem like you are bisexual? Like, what does that mean for you?
I guess it means for me, at least, like specifically with family, you know, when I meet new people, I tell them I'm bi, but specifically with family and friends I'd already had that didn't know, it feels like hiding because I don't really talk about it. If it comes up in conversation, I don't really volunteer it, just because the whole just having my identity being part of debate. It's kind of similar to like when I'm Black and I'm in a room full of white people and they start talking about the race, they all look at me and then are like, now you got to explain your existence. And I'm like, okay. I've never really wanted to do that with my sexuality. And so I just don't bother. And I figured, you know, it'll come up when I'm dating a woman. Then I'll be like, surprise, I'm bi. And, you know, I'll deal with it then. But that's kind of where I've seen it. Also with a friend I'd made previously, they said something bi-phobic, and I was like, ooh, that's not cute. And then I corrected them, but I corrected them to them. They see me as straight, and so it's like, but if I were a bi, they would see me kind of as like being a biased perspective.
Well, like what did they say, out of curiosity? Like, what did they say that was biphobic, and how did you correct them?
Oh yeah, it was at work. I have a bi coworker, and he's like openly bi. He's just doing his thing, living his best life. And like this guy is like, he was like, oh well, he's bi. He can't control himself. That's just how they are. And I was like, what is wrong with you? Like, who raised you? And I corrected him, and I was like, no, that's not the case. Like, really? And then he was like, oh, I'm sorry. But I know that reaction would have been different, because I've had that, you know, same reaction with family. Like, it would have been very different if I were a bi person saying that. Because then it's like, oh, well, of course you would say that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That is so interesting. Yeah, it's the stereotype that bi folks just can't control themselves, and that's why they're risky and all that. That's terrible.
Yeah, I hear that one a lot, and it's so frustrating because, you know, everybody is just who they are, and it's very case by case. You know, I don't struggle with monogamy. I'm not going to struggle with monogamy. It seems so like unimportant. Like, why even bring that up?
Yeah. Now I'm curious, because you've ingested a lot of biphobia, and what I've heard from a lot of bi women especially is that hearing that biphobia makes it harder for people to often come into their bisexuality. And I was curious if that was your experience as somebody who recently came into themselves.
Oh yeah. It's just like, even now it's constantly like, maybe I'm not bi, you know, maybe I'm just confused, and, you know, maybe, and like if I'm attracted to a guy in some situation, I'm like, oh well, you know, maybe that other stuff was just not real, it wasn't serious. And it's a lot of flip-flop back and forth, and it doesn't help when people around you validate it. And so it's hard to have these conversations sometimes. That's why, I'm glad you're having it, because you're like a cool source. You're very like understanding. And
I try to be.
but hearing it, yeah, but hearing it from other people, it's just, it's hard because they don't often mean the best. They don't, they don't have our best interest at heart. And, yeah, it's just, it's weird to struggle with that. I almost wish, I could just say definitely sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes I feel like it would just be easier if I could just say definitely I like this side or I like this side. So then it's like, at least I'm not having that war within myself,
But it's not that clean cut. It's not that easy.
Yeah. It's not.
Yeah, and I always appreciate that these conversations are more complicated than people like to make them seem. I think that that's part of the problem in general, is people like really like, I think everyone has a tendency to oversimplify very complicated things. And in the process of that, obviously we invalidate and erase people's experiences and perspectives, and that's not okay. That sucks. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, I've still got 27 more calls to try to get to, but this was a really, really good one. And I really appreciate you coming in and sharing your perspective as somebody who's recently came into themselves. That's amazing.
Thank you. I appreciate you allowing me to speak. And I just wanted to say thank you. Like, I really love your channel. And my sister, she's younger and she's trans. She came out about maybe less than a year ago, and it's just been really like helpful to hear about your experience. And you keep me educated, my eyes are open, tackling all that transphobia. I just really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you. Well, that's why I'm here. All right, well, thank you so much for calling in. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay. Oof, we got another someone 28 people. So my feeling with this call-in show is I think I want to take one more call, because honestly, so many of these have been really good. Like, these are really, really good. And I think we might have talked about, obviously not everything, but I think we've crossed a lot of ground. And as I've said, I don't have a control over who gets chosen. I'm assuming that the way that it works is people get in a queue. I think that's why, yesterday it was mostly men, because at the top of the show I said I only wanted to hear from men. And then, it, it got cut off. But yeah, I think I might just do one more, because I feel like we definitely so what I think is going to happen is I might do two different call-in show uploads onto my edited call-in show uploads. One will be with men and the other will be with non-men. And I think that the first one, even though the video is going to be the broadcast is longer, I think it will end up being shorter than this one, because so many of these calls have been just great. So I'm assuming that I will probably pick most of the calls from this broadcast. So yeah, I'm going to apologize to all the other people who I apologize to the people who I didn't get to. I feel like today's callers were just together and everything is good. And yeah, I need at least 15 minutes to get ready for my partner. So, yeah, I'm gonna take one more and then we're gonna call it. So, I apologize ahead of time for the people who are not gonna get to call in this week, but there will be other opportunities. All right, so here we go. One more. Hello.
Hi.
Hi there. Who am I speaking to?
Chelsea.
Hey, Chelsea. Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Maryland.
Oh, nice. I've never been to Maryland.
Oh, it's cool out here. You'd love it. Baltimore and DC, two really close by cities. I've been
to DC, but I've never been to Maryland, but
just never made it over the border.
I just haven't. Yeah, I've been like right there. You just never took the jump. Anyway,
right.
What is your true T?
I'm a cis bi woman, and I've been married to a straight man for the past 2 years.
Congratulations.
Thank you. But yeah, so for me personally, most of the time, especially now, after getting married, the only time I experience any kind of biphobia is if I offer that information to people, because looking, from the outside, I'm just in this, straight relationship. And the only recent time I had that was I have a pride magnet at work, and it's for the organization that we have at work. And one of my coworkers asked me, oh, why'd you take that? And I was just casually oh, because I'm bi. And he was but you're married. How does that work? It was I don't know what he's thinking in his head. Probably something along the lines of oh, they must have a lot of threesomes. Either that or, oh, I get to, have fun on the side. And I actually jokingly after that asked my husband, since I think you had an episode around that same time where you were talking about, for some reason, especially cis men seeing relationships that their female partners have with non-cis men, or women, or trans women, trans men, as being less than, and therefore allowed to happen. I was what would you do if I was hey, can I start dating women? He's no. You would definitely find a woman way more interesting than me, and I would be kicked to the curb. It's so bad about this, but we're monogamous. We went into dating monogamous, and I don't care to be polyamorous, so it works out. But most of I came out in high school, and that was probably more so when I was in both queer and straight spaces, having to deal with the different, more of microaggression type things that come with that. Because the first people I came out to were my lesbian friends, and I was oh, I think I might be bi, and their response to that was, no, you're not. You date men.
Wow.
And
just straight up.
Yeah.
Wait, but
yeah,
how would you say that though? Because you date men and you're expressing attraction to women, and so they're how would they not immediately get that that's bi? That's confusing to me.
I don't know. I think the way one of them put it in a way that was way more just upsetting than that, because this was I think I was 14. Not that my sexual history mattered at the time, really, but I was a virgin at the time. And one of my friends legit described me as too dick hungry to be interested in women. And I was I've had 2 boyfriends. What are you doing?
Wow. Jesus Christ. And you're 14 and talking about dick hungry? I don't even think I knew that phrase at 14. Jesus Christ.
I mean, I went to high school in Florida, so maybe that excuses.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. That makes sense.
Yes, just not to shit on Florida, but
So you're saying that a lot the times where you experience biphobia are when you out yourself. So I guess I'm curious now how you feel about the topic of so-called straight passing privilege.
I mean, for me personally, I understand that, especially when I've started reading a bit of queer theory this past summer, and a lot of language around it's complicated. There's a lot of, we don't necessarily have the language for it. So I get what you're saying with privilege isn't really the best word for it, because it's not fun that if I want to, if one of my friends is
saying something biphobic and doesn't know that I'm bi, then if I out myself, then I'm like, you know, I'm gonna make it weird. But in like my day-to-day life and my experiences, yeah, it's like I definitely don't experience any, you know, homophobia or biphobia like I used to when I was in school. And it's not because of like trying to hide it. It's just that I found a man. And so it's like, since I'm in like, that's another thing too, is a lot of the bi women who are talking about how like even in your cis relationship, it's not like necessarily perfect. I don't know. It's for me, like if somebody said, "Hey, Chelsea, you have straight passing privilege," it wouldn't upset me because I'd understand that, like, yeah, I have a lot of privilege being married to a man as opposed to a woman. You know, like the only lying I had to do with my grandmother was that we were living together before, but not having to lie about who my partner was, and that could easily introduce him to all of my family members. So yeah, it's like, it's complicated, but I do feel like there is some inherent like benefit to being in a straight presenting relationship, which I think you said for yourself too, since you can, sorry, I punched my phone. But you've said for yourself that you also feel like a little bit, I don't want to speak for you, but I'm trying to remember from
like I
the
said,
podcast that
I've definitely been in situations where men are very much appreciating the fact that we can go and, you know, go and do stuff and be outside with each other, and no one looks at us as anything other than a straight couple. So like, it's kind of hard for me not to see that as a bit of an inherent benefit, I suppose, because I know that we're avoiding a ton of shit because of that. And of course, for me, it's loaded where, you know, I remember when I was very young and men were very, very much obsessed with, you know, you have to look a certain way and you have to pass and present yourself like this and that, da 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 da. And so much of that was about flattering a man's image of his heterosexuality and all this other stuff. And, you know, that's, I remember that being a really upsetting thing for me at one point in time. But, you know, today it's not a thing I think much about because it's just my reality. So I found this conversation to be interesting because, you know, I know that there are people who outright deny any sort of benefit or say that the benefit is alienating to them. But I just know in my personal life how, you know, I don't navigate through the world the way that my lesbian friends do. Like I never think of how spaces may be unsafe for me because of my sexuality or who I love, because that's just not ever been a concern. You know, and I guess seeing that and knowing those experiences from my friends makes me feel like it's a bit of a benefit, you know, because I haven't had to fight for my relationships in the same way. So that's how I personally see it. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's kind of how I see it too for myself, but I think it's like bisexuality, I feel like, is kind of treated as this like monolith anyway, when there has to be, when there's like so many different personal feelings about it, like to the point where I, like you were talking about, like the internet's response to it. Like I know some people go so far as to like fully label themselves multiple different things of like, I'm androsexual, bi-romantic, you know, like all of these like subcategories of it, which can be very helpful and descriptive, but most of the time nobody wants to hear your whole like, you know, well, this is like, especially if you're not trying to date them, like, well, this is what I'm into romantically and this is what I'm into sexually. And, you know, most people, you don't have those conversations with just their friends unless you're trying to fuck them.
Yeah. And that's the thing, is like so much of this is a very like surface level thing. Like people are just reading you as a thing and assuming something about you because of that, and that thing obviously might not always be true, but that's kind of the way that a lot of privilege kind of functions. Is like, it doesn't, I mean, the intimate reality and knowingness that you have of yourself may not align with the way that people are seeing you, but people are still seeing you this way.
Right, because
what were you gonna say? Sorry.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that makes me think of a very stupid comment I saw online recently, more so talking about like race privilege, where there was an argument happening and somebody brought up that, like, to the commenter whose profile picture was a white woman, being like, well, you can't understand as a white woman, and then the woman responded like, why do you think I'm white? Because the color of my skin. And it's like, that's how it works.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, sometimes people are gonna just read you that way, because that's what it is. You might not be white, you very well might not be white at all, but people are gonna read you in that way, and that in a society that has a history of white supremacy is gonna be a benefit in some way. I think that it's such a complicated conversation because bisexuality is complicated, and there are a lot of people who I know aren't even intentionally trying to pass as anything, but are still being seen as something. And I, like, for me, it's like I am just existing, and people see me how they see me, and I can acknowledge that I have a ton of privilege because of that. That has a shitload of privilege tied to that. Does that mean that it's always, favorable? No. I think that that's part of where the conversation becomes complex, because oftentimes people read privilege as favorable, like, because people read me as a cis woman, I get a shitload of disrespect. I get a shitload of harassment. I get a shitload of being minimized, dismissed, silenced. Like, that's part of it. That's still, that's part of it. But being read as a cis woman, as a trans woman, still comes with, in my opinion, a huge amount of privilege, even if it's coupled with those things that are not positive, And I think sometimes people view it as a this or that sort of thing, and I don't think how privilege really works all the time.
Right. And so much of it is needs to go back to the topic of like intersectionality and identity and all of that stuff too, because like my experience as like a white bisexual woman from the South originally could be very different from like, a Black bisexual woman living in Seattle or something like that, where she can be more open, but maybe it deals with other issues that I don't,
Yeah.
And I don't know, we all have our problems, and some of them are worse than others, for sure.
Yeah, and that's why I think talking about them is so important, Like, I think these conversations can be so, you're either on this side or that side. They can be so divisive, in so many ways. But like, shit, man, we all have our shit. Can we just talk about our shit, please? It doesn't have to be better or worse. It doesn't have to be anything. But we can talk about our differences, and I think it's important to do that. So I think that we've got some, I think I'm going to close out the show now. You've really given a great perspective, and I really appreciate you calling in. Interestingly enough, I think you might be one of the only people who called in with this particular experience today, but I appreciate it quite a bit, because I think it really rounded out everything we have to talk about in this episode.
It was great talking to you.
Yeah, it was really, really great talking to you too. Bye.
Bye.
All right, guys. I actually feel like we've got a good show. I feel like this This is going to be a good show. I'm really excited to sit down and edit all of this stuff because I already know this is going to be like a great process, editing. I know yesterday's, which was still fun, don't get me wrong, there's gonna be more editing done to that one for sure. For those of you guys who are asking about where this goes, where this lives, this video will be, let me actually do this right now. This video will be unlisted on my channel, which means that it will not be publicly available to everyone. If you are looking at it right now, I'm going to give you a chance to sneakily copy the link for yourself, because this will be unlisted. It will not be on my page. I will be reposting this full thing onto my Patreon, and then hopefully in the next couple of days you guys will get some edited versions of these call-in shows, which will be way more easy to follow than the long 3-hour version of said show. I feel good calling the show here. I know we still had people here. Let me close it. Actually, I know we still have people on the line. I'm apologetic for that. I'm really sorry, but I feel really good about the conversations we have here. And I think that it's gonna be a really well-rounded show. So I'm gonna go and shower myself and you know, be decent. Yesterday's show is privated, but the link is I actually just posted it before I went live on here. I might also spend at least another 10 minutes putting together a thumbnail so I can actually post theoretically what will be the next. I'm still figuring out what I want to do. I don't know if I want to just upload, I don't know if I just want to upload the call-in show on Tuesday, or if I want to upload the next episode. The next episode is ready to go. The next episode, somebody asked the question actually in one of these chats about the comparison between men who like trans women who are not open about their attraction to trans women, and why and trans women who don't out themselves as trans. And that led to a really interesting conversation. So that's going to be the next conversation that we have on here. And so, yeah, I'm excited for that one as well. I'm not totally sure what direction I want to go in with the way that this goes up, but yeah, we're gonna definitely have some great stuff coming. I feel really good about the podcast and everything. I feel great about it. So hopefully you guys have been enjoying it too. I'm assuming if you guys are here. The two by call-in shows will be posted together. I think we're gonna have 2 different ones, because I think I'm probably gonna edit both of them down to about an hour and a half each, and I think it'll probably be better for everyone if we have the 2 different shows, because I know that there are some people who are going to be more interested in one than the other. I don't know. We'll see. I'll think about it when I actually start editing. I'll think about it, because I know for a fact that there are a couple of really, really good calls from the other day that I definitely want to include, but we'll see. These are all really great calls. So anyway, I will see you guys next time. I will talk to you guys next time. And if you guys are curious about my healing process and everything, I'm doing decently. I will be comfortable potentially doing camera stuff soon. I'm theoretically, you guys are going to get another review by the end of the month. Hopefully a couple of videos, but I have a lot of editing to do. I've been recovering, so I haven't had a lot of chance to do anything other than recover and play Witcher. But I feel pretty good about life now, and I've been able to get up and be active and do stuff a bit more. So I'm finally at that point in my healing. So yeah. Anyway, I'll talk to you guys next